Good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited today to introduce Paul Fetcher. Paul Fetcher is president of Great American Brokerage, a New York-based firm specializing in restaurants and retail. His restaurant experience dates back to 1963 and as a principal since 1968. He started in commercial real estate in 1969 and was the top retail producer nationwide for Cushman & Wakefield during 1970s. For 2.5 years, Mr. Fetcher led Coldwell Banker Commercial NRT's commercial division with 15 offices covering New York City and Long Island. Since founding Great American in 1980, he has been responsible for more restaurants throughout the greater New York metropolitan area than any other broker. Great American Brokerage, Inc. consults in retail concept, design, and development and has performed that function in lifestyle centers, downtown redevelopment, urban renewal, regional malls, specialty and entertainment centers, factory outlet centers, and airports. Mr. Fetcher holds the designations of CCIM, a Certified Commercial Investment Manager, as designated by the National Association of Realtors, CRX, Commercial Realty Executive, and CLS, Certified Leasing Specialist, as designed by the International Council of Shopping Centers. He has served on test writing committees for ICSC. He is an active member of LIBOR's Commercial Committee, and we welcome and turn it over to him. Thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. In case you're wondering where I am right now, what you see behind me is a lovely resort sitting on top of a mountain in Costa Rica, but we can talk about that opportunity separately. What we're talking about today is what you need to know about retail, but we're afraid to ask. So as Amy has done a good job of introducing me, here's who I am, Great American Brokerage, also restaurantexpert.com. Over the years, I started in commercial real estate in 1969. Despite having 54 years in real estate, I've never sold a house, I've never leased an apartment. All of my work has been commercial, and I think you might recognize some of these locations, some of these operations. But today we're here to talk about retail real estate. Now we're going to go through a lot of things today. Part of this may be very much like taking a drink from a fire hose. Hopefully, we're not going to leave you drowning or anything, but we are going to talk about retail, what it means, and some of the things you should know, and the synergies of retail. We're going to talk about storefronts, we're going to talk about shopping centers, we'll talk about downtowns, and we're going to talk about space. So first question is, how do you measure space? If you are in an office building will give you, let's say, a space that comes out to 1,000 square feet. But outside that space, you've got a lobby, you've got a hallway, you have elevators, you've got men's rooms, you've got women's room, you've got closets, you got all sorts of things, stairways. So if I take the 1,000 square feet that you're actually leasing, that's going to become 1,250 square feet because you're adding the proportionate share of the lobby, of the restrooms, of everything else that's there. So this gives you a very interesting thing that happens in offices, but not what happens in retail. In retail, so you can see this is a bit more complex if you've got a larger space in an office building. However, if you come down and go to, come on, whoops. There we are. Here we have a shopping center. So let's talk a little about the terminology. An anchor store is somebody that's a very large tenant, and generally the main reason that people come to a shopping center is in order to go to the anchor store. The other stores, the inline stores or an inside location, they will benefit from the traffic that's generated by an anchor store. Now, if I've got a supermarket as an anchor, that can draw 3,000 people a day. But if you turn it into a pet store, that may only have 300 people a day. Therefore, the inline stores would not be exposed to as much traffic. You want to deal with the folks in a store when they are out of their cars with dollars in their pocket. They got out to go to the Anchor, but they're also going to grab a slice of pizza or do something else on the side. The one that we have out in front here, this is a pad location, meaning it's freestanding, it's open on all sides, but it is not in line with the major stores. Or one other that we like over here, which is an end cap. An end cap is the space over here, which is the end of a line of stores with better visibility, better accessibility, and that would go for a premium price. So a neighborhood shopping center, we're going to talk about several different types of centers. The first is a neighborhood grocery anchored center. I'm sure you've seen these and you have one in your neighborhood. The anchor is going to be typically about 30,000 square feet. Could be 20,000, could be 50,000. In this place, if you are a tenant, you have to pay rent. In addition, you pay your proportionate share of real estate taxes for the center. Plus, you have common area maintenance. Common area maintenance is everything from sweeping the parking lot to keeping the lights on at night to, in a larger center, perhaps there's security. When it snows, you got to plow. Those are the common area costs, and this is divided where the cost is a numerator and the denominator is the portion of the center that you possess. So in that last one we showed you, the anchor would hold about 40% of the total square footage. Total square footage is known as GLA. G as in golf, L as in Lima, A as in alpha. GLA means gross leasable area. In this case, we also have repairs of the parking lot, lighting, landscaping, something like that. So those are the charges that would flow to a tenant in a neighborhood anchored center. Next, let's take a look at a community center. A community center is going to generally serve 100,000 to 200,000 in population and going to give you a big box anchor, a Home Depot, a Costco, something along those lines. So in this center, you also are going to be paying the same real estate taxes and CAM as your proportionate share. But in addition to the sweeping and plowing, you may also have security there. You know, the little cars that drive around with the flashing yellow lights on the roof. That's very much what you see. And here you are more likely to have landscaping in a community center to make that look attractive. Let's move on from there to the larger category, which is regional malls. This particular regional mall you're looking at here is Roosevelt Field. That is a regional mall and has, in this case, 5 anchors. And those anchor stores what draws the people, but other people will come and shop the satellite stores. Here, you're going to be about 40% of the GLA will be anchors and 60% will be small store space. Now, here's a little trick that developers play. If you're Macy's, and down here, this is Macy's. Macy's is about 260,000 square feet at that center. But the deal that they negotiate is they will pay the real estate taxes on their building and on the land under their building, but they do not participate in the real estate taxes for all the parking areas. Therefore, if you do a deal in an enclosed mall and in an enclosed shopping center, your real estate taxes are going to be measurably higher, typically 40% higher than they would be in a community style center. So here we have the basis. Yes, we have security as well, but now we also have a marketing fund. Now, I'm sure you've gotten in the mail or your Sunday newspaper a foldout, and in there are things for Macy's, but many of the smaller stores as well. A tenant in an enclosed regional mall will be required to participate in the marketing fund. You also may have a sprinkler charge. You may have insurance charges that go all of that. Altogether, your add-ons alone can exceed $100 a square foot. Plus, you've got to pay the base real estate tax and your base rent. So all in all, you may be $150, $200 a square foot, depending upon the strength of the tenancy that you're in or how much you are going to develop within that space. So if you have a food court, let's put a food court in there. I have all of those base charges. I have real estate tax. I have marketing fund. I have everything else that goes with that. However, I'm also going to have additional charges that are peculiar to the food court. Let's say I have a 20,000 square foot food court. If I do, 10,000 square feet will be behind the counter. The other 10,000 square feet is going to be the common area. That's where the people sit. But the seats are not dedicated to just one operator. So somebody may sit there in the morning for a cup of coffee and a donut, sit there at lunch for a sandwich and a salad, or come back late in the afternoon and sit there with ice cream. Therefore, there are greater efficiencies in the seating because anybody can sit at the open seats. You should have about 50% open area. But the tenant who is behind the counter, he will pay for the heating, ventilating, air conditioning that is within his space, but he's also got to pay his proportional share of the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning that takes place in that common area. Now, you may look at this list on the left where we have the things we've discussed before, CAM. Now, food court CAM, what's that? There are people in the project, and the jobs of those people, all they may do all day long is empty the trash, wipe down the tables, clean up after folks, put the chairs back in under the tables. And the cost of those people is also distributed among the merchants that are in the food court. So that is a food court common area maintenance that is over and above what you would pay for the typical CAM for the mall. I should mention as well, the repair and maintenance on the trays, on the tables, on the chairs, those are all costs that will get rolled up into the food court CAM. Now, let's talk about tenant mix. Let's assume that you have a grocery anchored center. How often are you going to go to that center? Typical merchant is going to go there once or twice a week, maybe once for your major grocery shopping, and another time during the week where you may pop in for milk or bread or eggs. What else and what tenants are somebody you're likely to visit more than one time per week? Well, number of things. You can go to the cleaners, dropping the clothes off, picking the clothes up. A bank, payday, you go to your deposit, you may need some cash midweek, so it's that. You can go to have your nails done, you can go for a slice of pizza. So these are all synergetic. Why? The frequency of customer visit to the anchor center is going to be once to twice a week. The customer visit frequency in the satellites also will be once or twice a week. So that should work well. Next, we're going to look at just seeing, bear with me, I'm checking here. Hi, I'm an AI assistant. Oh, we have AI here. I have old-fashioned intelligence. So I'm not sure how AI is going to help us in this presentation because I did it another way. Now we're in that neighborhood center that's anchored by a big box, and you may go there every 2 weeks or so. So what co-tenancies is somebody that you may go to once every 2 weeks or so? Well, you might go to Costco, you might go to a Home Depot, you might go to a Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that. So these are going to be other tenants that you would visit typically during the course of once or twice a month. Now, let's go to the Big Daddy, which is the enclosed regional mall. Enclosed regional malls, over 40% of all sales are fashion oriented. So now You want the fashion tenants to be there. Typical American will visit a enclosed regional mall once a month. It's driven by fashion. If you're going to get the dress, as ladies well know, you also need the accessories. And the accessories may be a different specialty store for shoes to go with that dress that you just purchased. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about online shopping. Think of a number. What percentage of total retail do you think is taking place online? Think of a number. The actual answer is it reached a peak during COVID of about 21% of retail took place online. That leaves 79% taking place on traditional real estate. But there are other centers as well. A lifestyle center. I'm sure you recognize Americana Shopping Center, which, by the way, has the highest sales per square foot per year of any shopping center in America. That's not hard to do if you've got a Louis Vuitton, you've got Cartier, you've got Tiffany, you've got all the great high-end retailers. So this one happens to be the best of all. If I look at a festival center, what's that? Hey, there's South Street Seaport. You probably know that. South Street Seaport, you're going to have a different ratio of merchants. A festival center is a place where people go for people watching and then decide what they're going to do or what they're going to eat while they are there. Now, for instance, South Street Seaport generates over 35% of its sales from food and beverage. So that's very convenient for the people that work down in the financial district or tourists that come down to see the Peking, the tall ship that's down there by South Street Seaport. People come to those, but you're also serving a downtown lunchtime population of over 50,000 people that could come here for lunch on just about a daily basis. In addition to that, here's another center. This is the Grove in Los Angeles. This one does almost 40% of its sales in food and beverage. You'll notice the core area here is Peoplescape. It's got lush landscaping. It's got a water feature. And you walk between stores without having to fight any traffic. That's a type of center. You will find the vast majority of centers. Here's Horton Square in San Diego. Horton Square is 7 stories high and just a great place to go and hang out. The one that just popped in here is City Jazz. That's in Las Vegas. Yes, every night there are jazz concerts. They still do plenty in food and beverage. That's part of the game. Here is the Fremont Street Experience, Glitter Gulch in Las Vegas. To your left there is the Gold Nugget, and you can see some of Binion's Horseshoe on the right, some of the classic things. Now, this was a structure that was designed by John Jurdy. It's a lattice work because, believe it or not, it can get pretty windy in Las Vegas. But what you have up top is 1,200,000 tricolor light bulbs. So what they do to draw people is every night from dark until about 2 a.m., they shut off all the lights on the building fronts, and this white area you see down the center becomes a television screen. You might see flyovers of F-14s. You could see a silhouette of somebody like Sammy Davis Jr. tap dancing to Mr. Bojangles. There are about 20 different shows that go off. Each one lasts about 5 to 7 minutes, and it happens every hour before the hour. Now, what does that do for the shoppers? Let's assume people go down there. There are street performers, there are street artists, everything from sketches to people who wear masks to do spray painting. and do a great, great job on it. So much of what they create is a happening, and a band will be out there as well, but the bands stop once again at 10 minutes till the hour. So people are drawn to the hour. Now, if you're there and it's 20 of, oh, let's just stay a little longer. You know what? I'll walk up, I'll grab another beer, I'll grab another bite to eat. And all of that will take place to bring people to this for the event that's created every hour. If you look at some of the other places like South Street Seaport or Faneuil Hall in Boston, they have deals with street performers. In order to be on that performance schedule, you must go through an audition, sign a license agreement. You're allowed to put a hat out so that people can tip you, but you're not allowed to put it in someone's face. You can just put it out in front of you. And you can get acrobats and performers or magicians, many, many exciting things that take place. Those are the kind of centers that people like to go to for the experience, for the entertainment, for the social interaction. These are all things that can be provided by such festival and entertainment centers. Here's another multi-use project. This is the Time Warner Center in Manhattan. Now, the Time Warner Center has luxury residences, Class A offices, has multi-level retail on the lower floors. You have excellent restaurants back up on this level right here. These have a beautiful view over Columbus Circle and looking straight down 59th Street. This makes for a great happening. You may go there to shop. The ground floor and second floor are set up like townhouse retail that you would find in Europe. It's got a great feel like that. When you go to the top, these are all 4-star restaurants. Per se, arguably the finest restaurant in New York City is here up on this dining level up here. So this is a multi-use center. You can live there, you can go to your office there, you can have your friends stay in a high-end hotel, you can go to dine, you can go to shop, or just to people watch. Also, in the basement is the highest grossing Whole Foods. That's on the lower level. That does almost $4,000 per square foot in sales. That's a big number. Okay, come on. I have more to show you. There we are. This is a typical neighborhood strip center. It is not a strip mall. It doesn't have a mall running down the middle. This is a strip center. This particular one is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And what they have done to make it more affordable for the tenants is put up an array of solar panels, and then everybody below gets a chance to participate in the electricity that's generated from those. Let's assume we're in storefronts. What do I pay in storefronts? We have plenty of downtowns here. This works well. So you pay rent, plus you pay your proportionate share of real estate taxes. If there's a parking area, if there's landscaping, then you would also have a CAM charge. But in New York City, you'd start out just with a flat rent that would include your real estate taxes. So your rent may go up 3% per year. However, you will also pay penny for penny increases on the real estate tax. We're back to Manhattan. In Manhattan, you'd pay rent, increases in real estate taxes, and base real estate taxes are commissionable. So if you're out there and paying $100 a foot on a street in Manhattan, and $20 of that is real estate taxes, your gross number is $100 a foot. Now, next year, when it goes up 3%, the real estate component in your taxes is going to go up by 3%. Plus, you will also pay penny for penny increases in real estate taxes. Is that double dipping? Yeah, but that's the privilege of being a landlord in Manhattan. So in this case, they're commissionable. If we go back to the prior example, if you pay rent and separately pay real estate taxes, the real estate taxes are just a pass-through. The real estate taxes are not commissionable in the suburbs. If you get it rolled into the base rent, now you got to have a discussion with the landlord whether or not they're going to be commissionable. So just to let you know, that battle is out there in front of you. Now, hi, Al. When I said write a letter of intent for a commercial building, I did not mean for you to write a letter in intent. When you make an offer, it really is well advised to put into that a lot of details. The more details you put into a letter of intent, the fewer details have to be negotiated later while you're running up legal fees for the privilege of doing that. So let's go through a few of these, and this is applicable not only to retail, but also to what happens outside in offices. So if it's an office space, you want to know what the net usable square footage is and the loss factor so that you are effectively being paid for the right amount. For instance, if you go to Park Avenue has a number of buildings that may have a 200-foot in one direction, 100 feet in the other direction. And therefore, it looks like it's 20,000 square foot gross. Well, if you're the only tenant on that floor, you're the only one using the hallways, you're the only one using the restrooms. In that case, you would expect that you would pay for everything on that floor. However, you also have to attribute your proportionate share of heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. Where is that? Well, typically, get into a New York City office building. Let me know if you find a floor 13. On floor 13, typically, that is going to be dedicated just to heating, ventilating, air conditioning equipment. So if all of that takes place over there on the 13th floor, and that services 10 floors, then 10% of that floor area, which is an additional 2,000 square feet, would be added into your rentable square footage. In addition, the ground floor, the lobby, the hallways on the ground floor, your proportionate share of that would also be added to your rentable square footage. So that tells you a little between usable and rentable. If it's retail, you are working on a gross square footage basis. If you are leasing 1,000 square foot store, the only thing other than the space you have within the store is going to be half the distance between you and a store next to you because of the thickness of the wall. If the wall is 6 inches thick, 3 inches of that on one side is yours, 3 inches on the other side of your space is yours. Plus, behind that, you measure to the outside of the outside wall and to the front of the storefront. So there's very, very, very little loss in going to a retail space rather than an office space. In the use of space, what is the specific use of space? Now, here's where this gets interesting. I have seen in leases, you have what's called a use clause. Well, what I like to put in there if I'm negotiating for a restaurant is production of food food and alcohol for on and off premises consumption. That gives me a broad use clause that I can put in any type of restaurant. Sometimes a landlord would seek to put in, look, you can only do a pizzeria in this restaurant, in this space. If you can only do a pizzeria, but along comes a Chipotle and they want to buy my lease or my space, they can't operate under my use clause because my use clause is too narrow. So those are something I always look for, try to get it as broad as possible so that I can change the concept that I have. I know people that have done a very nice job in setting up restaurants on Long Island, but then, you know what, that concept didn't work so well. In Broadway, if a show doesn't work out, they don't tear down the theater, they just change the show. So if I have latitude in my use clause, I can change one use to another use. I can change one brand name to another brand name. So those are some of the things I want to consider when I'm putting in my letter of intent. I want to have that latitude in terms of what I can do. Lease term, let's talk about that. Initial term, when does that start? Well, I rarely do a restaurant deal that doesn't get at least 10 years, but I want to control as much as possible. So I might want to have a renewal option or more than one renewal option, a 10-year base plus 2 options of 5 years each. That's something that would work pretty well for a tenant and putting him in place, but we want to make sure that he has that opportunity. You open a restaurant, you rarely make profit in the first year, just because startup costs, hiring and training that you have to amortize over the first year. There are a lot of things that you do that you really need to keep an eye on. So the lease term is important. Once you get up and operating, you don't want to be 5 years down the road and find out, oh, gee, I only had a 5-year lease, at which time you are subject to the whims of your landlord. Let's not do that. Let's control the space as best we can. Let's get as much lease term as possible. What about an extension? What about an expansion? I'm working on a deal right now up in Connecticut, which is a nice, cozy, you know what that means, a cozy restaurant space, but there's another restaurant next door. So as part of the deal, we're negotiating that the tenant next door, if they vacate, we'd like to have the option to move into that space or have the right of first refusal on that space. If we have that, then my tenant that I'm putting in is protected. Let's look at rent, base monthly rent. Well, is it a rent per square foot? Not always. We have a new space that I'm working on right now down here in Long Beach, which has outdoor dining. One lease I have right now, the tenant has 49, an occupancy of 49 inside the restaurant, but it has a wraparound, so it's 80 feet of frontage and can fit an additional 60 seats in the sidewalk and wraparound. Therefore, how many seats do I have for the restaurant? Is it 49 or is it 100? So you have to look at that because that's where your revenue is going to come from. If you're looking at the rent, what is included in base rent? If I am in an office building, I will have heating, air conditioning, and cleaning, and the water in the restrooms, all of that is probably going to be included in my base rent. If I am a retailer typically will be responsible for all of the utilities consumed within their premises. Now, I like it if I'm in with a restaurateur and he shows me his walk-in. When he closes the door, does he turn off the light switch? No need to have the light on if he's not in there. So if it's on, drive down Park Avenue any night and look at 10 o'clock at night, how many office lights are on. That's all included in the base rent. It's not just on when people are there, it's on when people aren't there, but through the rent, the tenant is paying for those utilities. Utilities may run $3 to $4 a square foot in a typical office setting, and certainly can run higher in retailer. A typical office is going to be open 40 hours a week. A retailer typically is going to be open 60 to 80 hours a week. So there will be a higher consumption of utilities in those cases. Let's talk about additional rent. What additional charges are there? Common area maintenance. Is there a cap on CAM? I've negotiated deals where I've been able to say, okay, tell me what the common area maintenance is now. Now, Mr. Landlord, I want you to do your best to hold down those charges as we progress. How do we do that? If I put a cap that the CAM cannot grow more than 3% per year, then I'm forcing the landlord to shop for the best utility prices, shop for the best maintenance prices, or the best maintenance agreements. Everybody's going to come out better that way. It's better for the tenant, but the landlord has a concern on holding that down. You can't always get it, but I asked for it. By the way, when it snows, and that's on a per event basis, and you pay your proportionate share. Although it is theoretically part of CAM, in what's happened to us over the last decade, we've had years with no snow, we've had years with no plowing, we have other years where you're going to be out there 5 or 6 times plowing. So that is on a per unit basis. So depending upon where you are, what utilities are paid. If landlord has a solar array on the roof, will the tenants benefit from that? Will they be able to save money because we're generating electricity out of the roof or not? Who pays taxes? Once again, as I said before, if you're in New York City, the taxes are included. Landlord will still work to hold them down. If it's a gross lease, and sometimes we have those, if you have a gross lease, who pays the taxes? You want landlord to do their best and constantly appeal the taxes to hold them down. Rent escalations. This is a tricky one. Rent escalations can vary tremendously with the area, with the people that are involved, with the nature of the tenancy. The stronger the tenant, the lower escalations. So if I go back to Darden Restaurants, the folks who developed Olive Garden and Red Lobster, they would typically have a 30-year lease term with the rents increasing 10% every 5 years, which is less than 2% compounded would come out to. But if it goes up 10% every 5 years, that's not a heck of a lot of increase. But that is something that they can get because of their strength. Now, landlords will always argue, well, the cost of the dollar, the value of the dollar isn't as good as it used to be. But wait, Mr. Landlord, if you have a mortgage on this property, does that go up every year? Oh, it doesn't? Oh, you have a fixed number of what you have to pay in your mortgage. Great. So why does the rent have to go up every year? And therein starts the negotiation. Condition of space. Who does what? What does landlord do? What is the tenant responsible for? If I have alterations or tenant improvement, I'm working on one right now where I'm getting a raw naked shell. It's a very good location, but I don't have hung ceiling. I don't have lighting. I don't even have a floor in the space. That's up to the tenant to put in. Now, if I'm putting in a restaurant, which I am in this case, if I'm putting in a restaurant, I want to make sure that that restaurateur has the opportunity to go in, design, build his kitchen, put his plumbing throughout, run his plumbing, water supply, and waste disposal over to the bar, and do all of that before I pour the concrete floor. Because if I leave that till the end, if I pour the floor up front, it's going to cost me more to dig trenches to put in the plumbing than it is to put in the plumbing and then pour over it. Does that make sense? Concession period. Here's where we get real interesting. There is a difference between construction time and free rent time. Let's not confuse the two. The first is, I agree to open in a place. You know what? I'm going to have to do a build out here. If I'm doing plumbing work, if I'm doing electrical work, I am going to require building permits. So number one, I have to build, I have to draw the permits. I do a layout, draw the designs for plumbing, electrical, and the like, MEP, mechanicals, electrical, and plumbing. When I have permits for those, then and only then can I start work. So very often it'll take 30 days to 45 days for plans, another 30 days for permits. So, hey, 10 weeks has gone by and I haven't been able to lift a hammer or install any drywall or do anything yet. At that point, once I have the plans, then I can start my construction. So if I have construction, I need period for that construction. Let's say it's 90 days. So that really comes out to a total of 5 months from the time we started. If we have that, then I'm ready to open for business, then I can start paying rent. Now, one question I would have is with paying rent is this something that I am operating and making money at that time? And do I have a full year at that time? Because what some landlords will try to do is say, okay, first year's rate is $30 a square foot, and then it goes up 3%, which would bring me up to $30.90 per square foot. But they will try to start that time from the time we signed the lease, and a year later the rent goes up. But wait, Mr. Landlord, I negotiated for a year, the first year's rent, but I'm not paying it to you for a year because I lost 5 months between plans, permits, and construction. So be careful of that. Make sure you get that right when you do that deal, because that doesn't matter just in the first year. It's every year thereafter, because your rent would be increasing 5 months earlier. And if it's increasing 5 months earlier, take that throughout the term of the lease and see what that means in dollars and cents, and it can be substantial. Once I'm open for business, as an incentive, I may receive free rent. Free rent is not construction time. Construction time is from the time you sign until you open for business. From the time you open a business till you start paying rent, that may be free rent time, if any. So that hopefully gives you a good idea of some of the things that you need to look out for when you're putting together these sorts of deals. Guarantees, what's a personal, what's a corporate, what's a good guy? A good guy, we cannot promise everybody's going to be open every day. If landlord wants a full personal guarantee, I typically let them know, hey, I will be glad to guarantee your rent if you guarantee me the sales. Of course, they're not going to do that. So you got to look at what you are going to do. A good guy makes sense. A good guy means I'm not going to be in there, have you chase me for 6 months to try to evict me, and during that 6 months, I'm not paying. I will be personally responsible for that period, for that good guy period. A good guy really needs to cover 3 things. Number one, the person who is the principal will personally be responsible for all rent and charges during occupancy. If things don't work out, I'd like to be able to put the keys on the table. I've already improved the space. Landlord isn't going to pay me for the improvements I've made. But what I can do is pay him, if I'm in the space, pay for use and occupancy of the space. If I'm not in it, then let me out of here. I don't want to have to owe you more. Well, landlords will respond to that and say, okay, but give me 3 months notice or give me 6 months notice, and then I can deal with that. That's the first item under the good guy clause, is all rent and charges during occupancy. Number 2 is everything will be done in a lien-free manner. I know a landlord who put in a tenant. The tenant wanted $500,000 worth of work to be done there, but he wound up only paying the contractor $250,000. So he was upside down, that he wound up with a mechanic's lien on his building for work that the landlord never asked for, but yet he had a lien placed on the property. So number 2, all work has to be done in a lien-free manner. And number 3, I'm giving you the space in a certain condition. I want it back in as good a condition as I gave it to you, with the exception that normal wear and tear will be accepted. So those are the 3 things to cover in a good guy. I have not in the last 10 years paid more, had a full personal guarantee. Used to get that, but you don't get anymore. Too many spikes and dives and unknowns that can jump up and bite you. We're not going to do that. Next, sign requirements. This is twofold. Number 1 is what the landlord restrictions may be. Number 2 is what the local restrictions may be in terms of signage. Got to work with that. Parking requirements for employees. You don't want your employees parking in front of your store. You want them parking behind the building, down the block, around the corner, somewhere else, so that the spaces in front of the store can turn over regularly, and are the best thing we can look for the existing tenants to thrive, because people can get in and out. Building access, open hours, what's overtime use of services. I know a restaurant that went into a major office building in Manhattan. However, as typical in a office lease is that landlord will provide heating, ventilating, air conditioning for 8 in the morning till 6 at night and till 1 o'clock on Saturdays. The rest of the time, they don't have to provide HVAC. But wait, I want to have air conditioning on because we're meeting on Saturday afternoon, or we're having a board meeting at 9 o'clock tonight. You will pay landlord for the overtime use of services. But remember, back on floor 13, we got to crank up that whole floor. So I'll typically be paying $175, $200 per hour for overtime use of services. In one particular case where a restaurant was in, do you know any restaurants do business after 6 o'clock at night in a white tablecloth restaurant? 7 days a week, they were paying for overtime use of services. They missed that in the lease. I can tell you, $200 an hour, the cost of heating, ventilating, air conditioning was greater than their rent. Simple as that. Maintenance and repair, who's responsible for what? I want landlord to remain responsible for the structure. After that, everything inside the space is the responsibility of the tenant. Look down the rest of this list. These are other things we need to deal with. Is the building ADA compliant, or is it grandfathered? Is it a green building? What is this? Fee to be paid was typically by the landlord, and when is it payable? That depends on the strength of the tenant. If I've got a tenant with $1 and a dream open up a store and he's got a 20-year lease, it's going to be difficult for landlord to pay everything. The vast majority of failures will occur in the first year. So I'll argue if 88% of failures are in the first year, great. Pay me something now when we sign so I can go out to dinner and celebrate. Pay me something when the tenant opens for business. Pay me the rest in a year when the guy's cleared the hurdle that he's going to be here for a while, and that's it. Theoretically, it's due up front. How it is paid and when it is paid is a subject of negotiation. If I bring you a bank that's going to sign a lease, you can pay me 100 cents up front because you can take that, and bouncing off the commitment, he can get a mortgage tomorrow on a lease that is signed today with a solid company. We've covered a lot here. What I want to do is kind of open this up to questions of anybody that has questions. Let me know. It's the call of them all. Don't forget that. So we're ready for questions. And you can put them in the chat box. And if you have no questions, that means I did a very good job. But I'm certainly ready, willing, and able to handle anything, any questions.
Is there any questions? Going once, going twice. I'm not seeing any, so.
Has anyone signed on today?
We have a few out there. Thank you
I'm glad to hear that.
much for joining us. I guess you answered everybody's questions in your presentation, that they don't have any additional ones, so that's great. We really appreciate you having you on today. Just a little plug for next week before I let everybody go. We're having NAR's General Counsel, Leslie Muchow, and she's going to be providing an exclusive update on the NAR settlement and its impact on the MLS rules. So don't miss that one. Head over to lirealtor.com/webinars and make sure you sign up. Thank you again so much, Paul Fetscher, for joining us. And we'll also be having hosting this replay on the webinar's webpage as well. So have a great day, everybody.